Have you ever lost a game where your opponents just picked on your partner and didn't hit you a single ball? Not knowing what to do when that happens is one of the most frustrating experiences you can have in pickleball. But what if I told you there's a simple set of rules that the pros use to turn this situation around? And by following these rules, you make it super difficult for them to target that player, giving you guys the advantage. In this video, we'll walk through each rule, explain why it works, and show you how you can apply it to your own game. But first, the pros are really good. Is this actually a common thing? To prove that it is, I found the best example of this happening in men's doubles. And that's the team of Ben Johns and Eric Lang. In the latest Major League Pickleball draft, Ben Johns was the #1 pick for men, and Eric was the last pick. So these two have the biggest skill differential of any of the other men in the league.
It's Eric Lang. Eric Lang is the factor right now. You thought he would be a guy that would be picked on.
Because of this gap, the strategy that every team that faced them had going into the match was to just target Eric. So for the rest of this video, we're going to use mostly clips from their games to illustrate what you need to do if one of you is getting targeted. You've probably been in this situation, just watching your partner and your opponent dink forever cross court, desperately wanting to get involved, but not knowing how to. You can't reach any of the dinks, and what's more frustrating, you can't even stand very close to where the dinks are landing because you have to cover the line. And this is the first problem to fix. You need to make it a lot more difficult for your opponents to keep the ball away from you. And that starts with your partner who's being targeted changing their dink target from sharp cross-court angles to somewhere closer to the middle. This frees you up to stand closer to the middle instead of all the way over to the line because you no longer have to cover that line. And what's more, it's going to be even harder for your opponents to keep dinking that ball to your partner. So Eric here, you see how it's landing in the middle. He's hitting it in the middle and it forces them to speed up at Ben, but they have to go through him because the line's not there. When your partner was dinking sharp cross-court angles, they could just return the favor and keep going cross-court. But now the ball's in the middle, it's harder to hit a sharper angle because that angle is just not there. This has already made it a lot more difficult for your opponents to execute their strategy. And because you're standing closer to the middle, you're gonna be able to reach out and grab a lot more dinks than you were before. And this is gonna put a lot of pressure on them to hit even more difficult shots to keep the ball away from you. But where should you be dinking when you actually do get the ball? As a general rule, hitting the ball wide back to the player cross-court from you is going to be your best option because it's more likely that you're going to see the ball again. There are two reasons for this. Dinking the ball cross-court is going to be your opponent's comfort shot. So it's going to be the easiest shot they can hit. In this clip, Ben is dinking cross-court to AJ and he keeps it there. And then I think around here, AJ gets impatient. Yeah, he tries to hit it back to Eric, but because the distance is so short and the net is so high, he mishits it a little bit and pops it up, which allows Eric to reach in and attack him. And that wins them the point. In addition to that, if they want to hit the ball to your partner who they've been trying to target, they now have a more difficult shot because hitting it down the line means there's a shorter distance between him and your partner, and the net is higher when you're hitting it down the line because the net is lowest in the middle. To make things most difficult for your opponents who are targeting your partner should be dinking middle, and you should be dinking cross-court. If you guys follow these two rules, you'll be able to position yourself in the middle of the court, putting a ton of pressure on your opponents and forcing them to hit very difficult shots to continue executing their strategy of targeting your partner. Now, this new dink pattern that we just went over, where the targeted player is dinking middle and the non-targeted player, the iced out player, is dinking cross-court, isn't going to be a familiar pattern for most players. There's going to be an adjustment period to even just figure out where to stand on the court and who should take which ball, because most players like to sit in the middle of their box and play pretty 50-50. Once somebody's getting targeted, everybody shifts in the direction of the targeted player. And since you're trying to get the iced out player more opportunities to hit the ball, they're gonna have to reach over, which is usually considered the targeted player's space. In the beginning, when Ben and Eric were playing their first matches, they had a lot of mix-ups. Ben would reach over and take a ball that he thought was definitely his because, you know, they worked really hard to have Ben have an opportunity to hit any shot. It was way over on Eric's side, so he's not used to somebody coming and taking that ball. But over time, this improved, and Eric started to develop an intuition for when he should back off and let Ben take the ball. So in this clip, it already started with Ben grabbing a forehand dink. He's coming over and watch Eric. Eric sees the ball. In any other match, that's going to be his ball. But because of their strategy, he's scooting all the way over. Look where he is now. And he gave Ben the ball, and that sets them up to win the point. Most importantly, you and your partner just need to be on the same page on what your strategy is, and then in the middle of points, communicate with each other with yours, mine, that kind of thing. Now let's actually watch a point that really illustrates a lot of these concepts.
Even with those firmer balls coming toward him.
In this point, Ben serves. AJ returns to Ben. Ben drops cross court to AJ. We've established gives him a better chance of getting the ball again because AJ's comfort shot is going to be cross court. He hits a difficult shot towards Eric, which is pretty low margin of error. If he popped it up, Eric or Ben could have reached in and attacked it, but he hits a good shot. Eric gets out of the way and lets Ben take that ball. Ben dinks it back cross court to AJ because that gives him the best chance of getting the next ball. AJ hits another difficult shot to Eric down the line, and Eric dinks middle because that's his job. Ben is able to get this ball. He dinks it cross court like he should. Eric goes middle like he should. Ben goes cross court like he should. And then AJ gets impatient, sees Ben is way over on Eric's side and thinks, hey, maybe there's an opportunity to attack. He doesn't have a good angle there. Like speeding up cross court is a pretty low percentage shot. He has to catch Ben by surprise or hit through him, and it usually doesn't work. So he does that, it doesn't work, and win the point. That's a great example of all three rules. They're hitting their dink targets, they're communicating well in the middle, and that's the fourth rule, which is always be looking for ways to force your opponents to hit riskier shots. In that rally, AJ had to hit 3 pretty difficult shots. 2 were down the line dinks to try to keep targeting Eric off of a cross-court ball, and 1 was trying to attack Ben from cross-court, which is a really low percentage shot. This is how you can turn the tables on your opponents who are targeting a player, because they're so committed to their strategy of targeting a player that when it's starting to feel difficult, then they start to go for shots that they really shouldn't, like that attack at the end of that point. And that happened a lot throughout this match, and it happens a lot through other matches that Eric and Ben played. The other thing is, we've been really focusing on dinks, but you can extend the logic of the dinks to other shots too, like thirds and returns. In that point we just saw, Ben dropped his third to AJ cross court. And that makes sense because it's harder for AJ to hit down the line on that next ball than cross court. We didn't see it in the point, but when you're returning, the same logic applies. It makes more sense for Ben to hit that return to AJ because dropping cross court is an easier shot than dropping down the line. So here you see Ben is dropping to AJ, and here Ben is returning to AJ. Yeah, they basically flip the script and say, you want to target Eric? Okay, we're going to target AJ. And it's not because he's a weaker player, but it's because he has the hardest job keeping the ball away from Ben. So all of this is making a lot of logical sense, except for one thing that I noticed. It happened so many times that I realized it couldn't be a coincidence. And that was Ben hitting his drives cross court to AJ's partner instead of AJ. So here you see, look how far he is to the right here. He's driving across court. There's so much open space on the left here. And even though McGuffin is able to get it cross court, Ben can reach it and drop it down to the point. Basically, all the rules that we've heard so far is target AJ or have Eric dink to the middle. So why the change here? What I realized is that in all of these cases, Ben was stepping over onto Eric's side and driving that shot cross court to the returning player. So that player was still making their way up to the kitchen line, and Ben was all the way over to the right side, hitting a cross court for him. There's one simple explanation for this, which is the person running in has less offense, so they're a better target for that drive. You might earn a pop-up or at least a weaker ball that you can drop to get into the kitchen. After watching a few more of them, I realized that there was something else. What he's able to accomplish by driving that ball cross court is he leaves the whole left side of their court open, which makes it more likely that that player hits the ball down the line or to the middle, which lets Ben grab that ball because that whole side is his. So this increases the likelihood that he's able to hit the third. In contrast, if Ben was to not cross over and let Eric that drive or drop, the likelihood that Ben got iced out was a lot higher. And if Ben drove the ball down the line, then first he wouldn't be attacking the returning player, which is a bad choice anyways, but also it would give AJ the opportunity to hit a sharp angle to the open court, which would be bad for Ben. You can see how all of this is part of the playbook. It's very consistent. Almost every ball that Ben hits is targeting the player cross court from him, unless he's coming over and hitting a drive cross court on the third to the returning player. In this video, we've mostly been talking about things from the perspective of the iced out player. You can sort of reverse all of the roles in your head and think of it from the perspective of the targeted player as well. One thing that's really important from a mindset perspective for the targeted player is to not get in your head about the fact that you're being targeted. The first few times I got targeted in tournaments, I felt embarrassed and anxious and worried that if they were successful in their strategy, it would prove something like I was the worst player on that court, or I didn't belong, or I was a bad player, or something like that. All of that is sort of just noise. It doesn't really matter, because what matters is how you rise to the occasion and find ways to pick the right strategy for your team to win. So if part of your strategy is to let your partner get more involved, because maybe it is actually a big skill difference between you and your partner, then all of the rules in this video are really important. If it's more equally matched up, then actually you should be thrilled to just keep dinking, and maybe you're actually undeservingly being targeted and you should be taking all those balls and dinking and winning those points. Okay, this is Eric just being a beast. They speed it up at him, he hits a huge counter, another counter, an attack, boom, huge. This match was so crazy. People were getting really hyped. Irrespective of all that, you want to bring your best abilities to that game and play confidently. You don't want to play scared. You want to still hit your shots and play your game. In the first few games that Ben and Eric played, Eric was playing a little unsure of himself. He wasn't really playing his game. In a lot of cases, the opponent's strategy of targeting him was working. But over time, he started to get more comfortable and more confident, played more aggressively, and was punishing his opponents for targeting him. When your strategy of targeting somebody starts to backfire and that targeted player is rising to the occasion and punishing you, then it can be one of the most momentum swinging moments in a match, because now you have your opponents questioning their entire approach to this game. Once Eric started rising to the occasion, you could tell that it was getting into the heads of his opponents, and they started playing worse because of it. Even though Ben and Eric didn't win the whole thing, Eric's epic playing shocked everybody and showed just how well you can perform even when your opponents are targeting you. The ability to get out of your head is one of the most important things to perform well in competitive environments like tournaments, but it's not hard to do. There's a simple and powerful technique that I've used to perform my best in tournaments, and it's the single biggest contributor to my winning tight matches to break into my first pro main draw match. And it's the single biggest thing I attribute to my ability. Not too long ago, I made it through my first pro qualifier into the main draw. There were a couple tight matches that I had to win along the way. Discovering and using this technique is what allowed me to win those matches. Watch this video to hear that story and see how you can apply that technique to your own game.